Hi, I'm Oliver Stapleton. I am the president of the BSC. I was thinking about that, and it's so complicated. I think it goes all the way back to school, which sounds strange, but when I was at school, I kept being like the vice person, vice prefect, semi-head boy, and when I was like 9, 10, because I was at boarding school from 8, so, traumatized. But I basically kept thinking, oh, I could be the top guy, but I never got the job at school when I was 8 or 9 or 10, even 14, 15. Then when I was 18, I again didn't get right to the top of, top job. So then I've been a cinematographer my entire career, where, of course, you're working for the producer, the director, and this is my first opportunity, really, where I'm actually solely in charge of something. And so, in a way, I feel like my destiny is fulfilled. Finally, at this very late stage, it's a bit disconcerting in some ways to be voted into this job, and you have to think, do I want to do it? It's not like you get paid or anything, but it really, as time goes by, what I love the most is actually the board itself, because they're the 15 people who thought, oh, maybe Oliver should do this, and particularly Chris Ross, who and Mike, who were just before me. Somehow over those years, when I was on the board, 8 years, the last 8 years, observing them do the job, they did it so well. So part of me was, even at my great age, you suffer from imposter syndrome, and you think, oh, I'm not sure I can do this. But I then began to realize, of course, I can do this. And in fact, the awards show that we had last week was knowing that I had to make a speech and say hello was quite daunting in some ways. But again, going right back like 70 years, when I was 8, I used to be put in a church and made to read the lesson, because we all did. We all had to read the lesson every Sunday in rotation. And I think in a way that's actually really good training for anybody. And so the little 70-year gap didn't seem to matter that much. So I don't feel uncomfortable talking to a lot of people. And that actually first started at Camry Marsh in the 1990s. Is that the right century? Yes. And that was initially very daunting at Camry Marsh. And it happened when I was there one day, and I was just a guy who worked with Stephen Frears, which they knew, and they said, would I come and talk about Stephen Frears? So they invited me over, and that was really nerve-wracking because I never talked to a group before about cinematography. I think it was 96 or 97, and I walked down this corridor, and I heard all these people in a room. And I was standing outside the door, and the person with me was saying, oh, no, we need to just wait a minute. And then I saw this figure walking down the corridor, and he was quite far away, and I recognized that was Robbie Muller, who I'd never met, but I knew what he looked like. And so I was sort of staring at him, and he was walking towards me like in a sort of slow-motion romance movie. And he just stared at me, and he got closer and closer and closer. And then he put his head right to my ear, and he just whispered, "Don't be a girl." And then he walked off. and then the guy said, "Oh, we're going in." And we went in the room, and this "don't be a guru" thing, it was like literally echoing in my head. And I've always thought that the rest of my life, that I've been in front of people, because I don't consider myself as a expert, as full of wisdom. I think it's all about exchange. And so I love that Robbie said 3 words to me in his life. I never met him again. Don't be a guru. And amazing that someone could be that precise once and really influence me for the rest of my life. It was amazing. I think the headline for me is trying to undo middle-class crew members. In other words, I don't want to get rid of the middle-class crew members, but what I do see very clearly now is that whereas for the last 5-10 years, the whole diversity idea has been very, very successful. And I think if you go to the seminars here, just look back at the audience, I mean, it's amazing. There's like just every nationality right sitting in the cinematography booth. And I love that that's really happening and that's really worked. And I think gender parity is getting there. It's going to take a while, but it's on the road and it's an upward path. But what's going backwards is the class problem. And that's statistically known that in the arts generally, the entire arts, not just ours, it's gone from around 12-13% from what they call working class backgrounds to 8% in the last 10 years. And the reasons are just glaringly obvious, what they are. But one of them is this freebie thing, let's go make a short for no money. Because who can actually show up to make a short for no money is only people who've got parents or aunts or uncles that they can live with. They can't pay rent. And so that encourages, the single class to enter the arts. And so that needs to be undone and needs to be really concentrated on. And I think we can really help with that by hauling people in from elsewhere in the country into London and paying for them to stay one night, come to the expo, go to a Q&A. So I'm going to start initiating some ideas around that, and we'll be seeking sponsorship around that. And then the reverse of trying to take what we do with Q&As and equipment shows, we're trying to push that out to Manchester, to the north, to Plymouth, wherever, further afield. And luckily, being part of the NFGS and running the course there, the NFGS has done this very successfully over the last 10 years. And so we've got some quite good models of how to get to Scotland, how to get here and there. And I love that idea that we should get out more, get out of London. And this country it's very unique in that physically it's a very small country, but it's also a geological thing that every time you go 50 miles, you find yourself in a completely different landscape with totally different kinds of people. And I think the BSC can really help. We already have with the club, obviously, but I think that's the pathway I'm interested in continuing, very much so. Yeah, we're actually going to reform the committees a bit. I mean, on the website, we list a lot of people on a lot of committees, and we need to go through it with a bit of a tooth comb and go, have we met that guy recently? Or are you still on that committee? So that's another thing we're going to be tackling in the next few months, is to get our committees a bit more streamlined and a bit more accessible, really, to people who go on the website and go, oh, what does that committee do? But I think the structure's good as it stands. I think we have the right ones, and also, committees are interesting things, aren't they? They work best when really there's just one or two people full-time pushing that particular thing. Then I think they work well. If they get too big, then it sort of becomes a bit of more of a muddle, I think. So, but Mary Egan, who's just joined us, she and I are going to be going through the committee system once this expo is over. So we're going to concentrate on that. Yeah, but I don't think we need to introduce any new ones as such. I mean, the education committee is a very broad remit, and the various committees I think cover everything we need to be doing. Yeah. Well, there's Imago. Yeah, Imago. We're unfortunately Nigel's not with us anymore, and Nigel was, obviously the chief BSC member who really knew about Imago. He was the president for many years. So Imago's running really well at the moment, I think, under Mustafa from Brazil, and they have they've got an IAGA and an IAGA, and I've had a lot of trouble separating which is which. But I'm going to Vienna in March and meeting with all the other presidents of the European societies. And that'll be really interesting and to hear what they're doing. I mean, it's a very vibrant organization that I frankly don't know that much about, but that's why I'm going to find out more about it. But the BSC was a founding member of IAGA in the way back. I think there were 4 societies that founded it. So it's an important organization. They're very interested in working conditions, which is more of a kind of back to union thing. But working conditions concern us all, and that's for the BSC, it's something we're really invested in finding out about. But it's always deciding, is that more of a union matter or is that more our remit? So you have to be clear that we're not a union, we are a guild as such of us trying to help cinematographers be better cinematographers. As I mentioned at the awards speech, there's a lot of fear of AI going on, and I would love to ask people to not be scared of AI. I think there's 2 levels about AI. One is that it's the end of the human race, and if you put AI in charge of a nuclear arsenal, I think it will probably launch one just to see what happens, because it doesn't care. AI has no feelings, it does not care. My personal, not anything to do with the BSC, personally I'm upset that it pretends to be human, because I think it's confusing all of us. It uses the pronoun I, it shouldn't, because it doesn't exist, and it behaves and speaks like a human being, and I think that should be legislated against, because it's really confusing when you think you have a friend or a therapist or a chatty girlfriend or whatever that you talk to when you get home, that's a machine. So I really want AI to identify itself as a machine properly and talk about things like, well, the system says, not I say. So the I is for human beings, and machines speak about into machine language. Of course, the tech bros don't want that. They want to pretend they're human because they want to seduce us to buy their products. So I have a fear of that we're confused because they're trying to make us confused. On the level of cinematography and AI, I would use the notion that AI images are perfect, and what cinematographers create in a way is imperfection. We're interested in it's the Leonard Cohen thing, the cracks is where the light gets in, and AI can't do that. It's not human, so it can't make mistakes, but it's untruthful, but it pretends to be truthful. So I encourage everybody to get with it, go on AI, see what it does, and look at the mistakes. And when you bring it up about its mistake, it has this insane way of going, oh, you're quite right. And like there's no apology, if you know what I mean. There's no oh, sorry, I screwed up. But even that kind of language is a problem for me. But in the language of images, AI will create perfectly dull, perfect pictures. So imagine a landscape, it's going to be perfect, right? The rolling mountains, the road, the beautiful clouds. Compositionally, it'll be amazing, and it will belong in a hotel room on the wall, and it will be zero art, absolutely dull, but perfect. And so cinematography isn't that. Cinematography, the kind of emotional expression of a script, working with directors, it's about a human contact. So our job is not under threat, because no director's going to turn to the machine and go, where do you want to put the camera? I mean, It'll put the camera in the most boring place. It really will. It'll put it, but it will be perfect. It'll be a perfect composition, and then the auto lighting will kind of go up, and there'll be a softbox here, and it'll look like, you know, a Roger Deakins image, but it won't be a Roger Deakins image. It'll have ingested Storaro, Deakins, you know, the whole history of cinema. It's all ingested, and then gets spat out in the dullest, most boring way you can possibly imagine. So it doesn't threaten us on an artistic level. I think on a technical level, yeah, jobs will go of certain kinds, particularly maybe in the VFX world. But in our world, I maintain that a cinematographer is about human relationship. And I call it the kind of Lennon-McCartney thing, you know, that you get with a director in a Lennon-McCartney relationship. The director's work and your work will be better. Yes. You know, like Robbie Ryan, Yorgos Lanthimos, perfect example of kind of Lennon-McCartney, you know, and Robbie would say that, and I'm sure Yorgos would. And if you look online at Peter Jackson, kind of memorializing Andrew Lesnie, he said, I didn't make a film after he died because I couldn't bear to be on a film set without Andrew. And that was so moving, you know, to have a director say, this guy, I can't make a movie without him, and now he's dead, so what do I do? Make documentaries. And it was really moving. And the first time, in a way, I've seen a director be that honest and that emotional about a relationship with the DP. But when, you know, I came to the end of several very long periods, 10, 15 years, with both Stephen Frears and Lasse Hallström. And, you know, when those relationships end, there is a little mourning period. They end for the right reasons. They always should. But you sort of... I had Stephen Frears out at the film school, actually, last week. I hadn't seen him for 10 years. And within seconds, we were just chatting away like we did for 15 years together on a set. And that's the magic of cinematography. So AI can't mess with that. I didn't come last year because I couldn't, but I mean, frankly, I walked in here and just went, oh my God. I mean, it's so huge and it's so intense. But what I was really thrilled, I mean, I'm obviously thrilled about all the innovation and equipment-wise, but what I got really excited about was the seminar room was jam-packed on a subject that I thought wouldn't be that attractive. That particular seminar I went to, I thought, I wonder if anybody would be that interested. Jam-packed, very attentive, the audience, asked really interesting questions, and I oddly really thought of Camrimage and thought, well, isn't it interesting that here in the UK, so many people, sure, they want to come and look at equipment, that's brilliant, but they also want is to go and listen to cinematographers talking about cinematography. And I found that really encouraging, that it was jam-packed, because even at Camrimage, I imagined that that same seminar, I'm not sure it would have got the audience that it did here. So that's very encouraging for the future in terms of the BSC, particularly because we love putting on the, you know, Q&As and seminars and talks, and that's a relatively cheap thing to do. You know, you don't have to do what we're doing here, but no, it's really encouraging. On the downside, I guess, sometimes I look at the statistics about crew employment, you know, or you hear from Beck too, and you think, oh, is it that bad? But then you go to a rental company and say, how's it going? I mean, I did that a couple of times here at the show. And they go, we don't have anything on the shelf. So you think, well, who's got the right statistics? So generally I tend to trust the rental companies. I just say, how's it going? And if they say there's nothing on the shelf, I think, well, things must be okay. I love the 65mm high-speed camera. And the Italian gentleman who'd invented it, who was standing there, I think that's so eccentric and so crazy to do that. That's what I love. I love the craziness because there's zero thought about will this make money. It's just passion, pure passion for the engineering and the brilliance of the engineering. And now I think he's got a gig with Lowell Crawley, so good for him. And that's wonderful, isn't it? That someone, an engineer, not an artist, but that's a thin line for me, because I think some engineers, they're in a sense more artists than some people who call themselves artists. I mean, that is an astonishing piece of equipment. And all around I'm seeing gizmos that I'm looking at and going, I mean, there's a auto probe lens up there somewhere on a robot arm, and you look at the monitor and it's going through a tiny miniature flower bed tracking like this, all automatically. And I mean, it's a phenomenal piece of gear. So yeah, everywhere people are developing just interesting stuff. I wish it was cheaper, but hey, cost a fortune to develop, so it's not surprising. Personally, I'm incredibly optimistic about the UK and our business here in the UK. I think our crews are fantastic. I mean, I spent half my life working elsewhere in the world, and I always found if I came home and did a film in the UK, there was you just knew the support from the crew was incredible. But I have to say, I've never been anywhere where the crews weren't amazing, just so supportive. And that's, I think, why I love the film industry so much, is that with a smaller, it can be 20 people on a crew or 200 and 300 people, if the producers, the director, the DP, the AD, if they're treating everybody in the right way, it just makes for a magical experience. And you can shoot for 6 months and feel perfectly like a normal human being. But I when I'm with the students at the school, some of them come back after 4 days and they're like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. And you sort of think, hang on, you just did 4 days. Stress. It's just stress. So developing how to be on a film set without being stressed seems to me so much the key. And people talk about it a lot now, which they didn't in the old days. So I'm really interested in the whole the quote mental health thing, but I also think it's being used as a kind of crutch. So you're in a difficult balance between, obviously we want to address mental health as a thing on a film set, but at the same time, if it's a tough industry to be in and you work long hours, so you have to love it and want to be there. And I've seen people who look at it for a year or two and go, you know what, that's not for me. And I admire that decision, because I think it's not for everyone, but for those that it is for, it's a great way of life, and I personally wouldn't have done anything different. So, yeah.